In September 1974, Curtis Mayfield waited outside a concert venue in Washington, D.C. for 3 hours. Not for a ticket, not because he was late and the line was long. He was waiting to speak to Stevie Wonder. Curtis Mayfield was 32 years old. He had been making music since the early 1960s with the Impressions, then solo. He had written People Get Ready, one of the most covered songs in American music history. He had released Superfly in 1972, and the soundtrack had sold over 1 million copies and had redefined what a soul album could do commercially and artistically. He was not struggling professionally. He was not in crisis in any way that the public could see. But he was carrying something. The music he wanted to make after Superfly, politically engaged, unflinching about the realities of black urban life in America, was not what his label wanted. Too dark, they said, too political, too far from what his audience would accept. For 2 years, the label had been applying this pressure. For 2 years, Curtis had been deciding what to do with it. He had a question. He could not find anyone who could answer it. Not his manager, not his musicians, not the other artists he knew and respected. He believed Stevie Wonder could answer it. Stevie Wonder in 1974 was at the height of one of the most extraordinary creative runs in American music history. Talking Book in 1972, Inner Visions in 1973, Fulfillingness First Finale released that summer. Each album a refusal to compromise. Each album saying, with increasing authority, that an artist of his stature could make exactly the music he wanted to make, and that the audience would follow. Curtis arrived at the venue in the late afternoon. The show was at 8. He did not have backstage access. He did not know Stevie Wonder well enough to call directly. He waited outside. His bassist at the time, a man named Joseph Scott, who had been playing with Curtis since the early 1970s, was with him. Joseph described the wait in an interview he gave to music journalist Ronan Rowe in 2002. He said they stood outside the venue for 3 hours. He said Curtis did not seem agitated. He seemed certain. Certain that the wait was necessary. Certain that the question required this specific person. Certain that 3 hours outside a venue was not a long time to wait for the right answer. At approximately 7 in the evening, one of Stevie Wonder's road crew came out for a smoke. Joseph knew him. They had worked adjacent circuits for years. Joseph explained the situation. 15 minutes later, Curtis Mayfield was inside. Stevie Wonder was in his dressing room, not yet in his stage outfit. An hour before the show. The specific, focused quality of someone in the process of gathering themselves toward a performance. Curtis sat across from him. He asked his question. How do you know when what you want to make is worth the cost? He explained. He described the label pressure, the 2 years of being told the music was wrong, the specific, grinding uncertainty of a man who knows what he wants to say, but cannot determine whether the knowing is enough justification for the consequences. Stevie listened. He did not respond immediately. He thought about it in the specific way that people who have been asked important questions actually think about them, not the quick response of someone demonstrating that they understand. The slow response of someone who takes the question seriously. Then he said something that Curtis Mayfield described in the only interview he gave specifically about this meeting, to music journalist James McBride in 1996, as the thing that allowed him to continue making the music he believed in. You don't, Stevie said. Curtis waited. You don't know if it's worth the cost, Stevie said. That's not the question. He paused. The question is whether you can live without making it. Curtis was quiet. If you can live without making it, Stevie said, then maybe they're right. If you can't, then it doesn't matter whether they're right. Curtis described what these words did to him. He said they did not resolve the commercial problem. They did not change what the label wanted. They did not make anything easier in a practical sense. They gave him permission to stop asking the wrong question. He had been asking, is what I want to make worth the cost? Stevie had answered a different question entirely. There's No Place Like America Today was released in 1975. Everything the label had said would fail. Political, dark, unflinching. It reached number 3 on the R&B album chart. It is considered today one of the most important political albums in the history of soul music. In August 1990, a lighting rig fell on Curtis Mayfield at an outdoor concert in Brooklyn. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He lived for 9 more years. In 1996, he released New World Order, recorded lying on his back, one line at a time, because he could not sustain breath while lying down for long enough to record full takes. The album was reviewed as one of the most important recordings of his career. He could not live without making it. The answer to Stevie Wonder's question, given in 1974, proved in 1996 in the only way that matters. Curtis Mayfield died on December 26, 1999. He was 57 years old. Joseph Scott, who had stood outside the venue for 3 hours that September afternoon in 1974, described the wait in the 2002 interview as the most important 3 hours he had spent in 20 years of working in music. Not because of what happened inside, because of what it said about Curtis. That he knew the question required that specific person, that he was willing to stand outside a venue for 3 hours to ask it, that he understood the difference between a question you can answer yourself and a question that needs a witness. Stevie Wonder's question was simple. Can you live without making it? Curtis Mayfield proved the answer for 25 more years. Lying on his back, recording one line at a time, making it anyway. Because he couldn't live without it. He never could. From the first record to the last, he could not live without it. That was always the answer. He just needed someone to show him where the question actually was.